Before we begin, please hit that like button, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for being part of the story. This incident happened about 5 years ago. I've been working as a security guard for over a decade now. With that much time in the field, I've seen a lot, and not just the usual stuff. Over the years, I've had more than my fair share of encounters with the supernatural. In fact, they've happened so often that they've started to feel like just another part of the job. However, there was one assignment that left such a deep scar on my memory that I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. The job involved guarding a house in one of the rural provinces. My supervisor told me it would be very simple. Patrol the house a few times during the night and do one interior check, just once per night. At first, I was pleasantly surprised. The job seemed so easy and didn't require much effort, but that feeling quickly turned into suspicion. Based on past experience, I've learned the hard way that jobs that sound too easy usually come with hidden strings attached. I was sharp enough to be cautious, so I asked my supervisor straight up, "What's the deal with this house? Why is the job so easy?" He just replied,
"It's an easy job, and you're still complaining?"
He also told me I'd be working the night shift, while another guard would cover the daytime hours. He was right. I couldn't really argue with an easy job, so I started on day 1. On the first day, I arrived at the house in the afternoon, just before evening. The moment I saw it, I felt a chill. The property was deep within a plantation area, far from any neighbors. It looked abandoned, like no one had lived there in years. The garden was overgrown with thick weeds, untouched and wild. There, I met the day shift guard. He gave me a quick rundown of the routine, nothing complicated. We had a small security booth out front, and the rule was simple. Patrol the perimeter every 2 hours and enter the house only once per night. Just once. That was it. We didn't talk much. He was in a hurry finishing up his shift, and I didn't want to ask too many questions. It felt like it would have been rude. Soon after, he left, leaving me alone with the property. As night fell and darkness crept in, the atmosphere grew even heavier. I've guarded a lot of places, but something about this one felt different. From the moment I laid eyes on it, I had the unsettling sense that something, or someone, was watching me from inside. Still, I kept my cool. I followed the routine, did my perimeter checks, and tried not to let my imagination get the best of me. Then, around midnight, it was time for the interior check. I grabbed my flashlight, left the booth, and unlocked the front door. As I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was a set of family portraits hanging on the living room wall. I walked over for a closer look. One frame displayed a portrait of a family of 3, father on the right, mother on the left, and a child between them. Their expressions were calm, but their eyes looked unnervingly real, almost as if they were following my every move. I quickly moved on and continued the inspection. Despite how long the house had been empty, it was still well furnished. The living room opened into a wide hall filled with old wooden furniture. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of dust. I passed the kitchen and the bathroom, both still stocked with utensils, toiletries, even dishes in the sink. It looked like someone had lived there just yesterday. Then I headed upstairs. As I climbed the stairs to inspect the second floor, I noticed something disturbing. On the dusty floor, the only footprints visible were mine. Not a single print from anyone else, not even faded ones. It was a clear sign that none of the previous guards had ever set foot inside the house. I didn't think much of it. I saw it as part of my duty, so I kept walking up the stairs to the second floor. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. In the master bedroom, there was an unmade bed, an old wardrobe, and a strange, dark stain on the floor. It looked embedded in the wood. Just looking at it gave me goosebumps. I quickly backed out of the room and shut the door behind me. The second room looked like it had once belonged to a child. There were toys, books, drawings, and other belongings scattered all over the floor. The third room was empty, used for storage, with old clothes piled inside. After looking around the second floor, I went around and shut the doors to each room. But just as I was about to close the door to the child's bedroom, I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the shape of a small figure standing silently in the corner of the room. I stood there, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. What was that? A trick of the light? My imagination? I took a deep breath and turned my head to get a better look, but there was nothing. The corner was empty. Whatever it was, it had vanished. Trying to shake off the unease, I closed the door and made my way downstairs. But as I reached the first floor, I suddenly heard a sound coming from the kitchen, the distinct dripping of water from a faucet. Steady, rhythmic, and very clear. It struck me as odd. I had checked the kitchen earlier, and there was nothing unusual. So where was that dripping sound coming from? I went back in to check. Sure enough, water was dripping from the faucet into the sink. I walked over to turn it off, but just then I saw, in the reflection of the kitchen glass, a figure standing behind me. Startled, I immediately turned to look, but again, there was nothing. I stood in the empty kitchen, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the eye. I quickly left the house and returned to my post outside. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the experience was more than enough to confirm my suspicion. There was definitely something going on inside that house. On the second night, I returned to work at the same house. Everything felt just as before, an eerie, chilling atmosphere that made me shiver the entire time. As before, I entered the house at midnight for my routine inspection. The first floor looked exactly the same, except for one thing. My footprints from the night before were still there, clearly visible in the dust, and they were the only ones. Not a single new footprint. This meant the day shift guard still hadn't set foot inside the house to check. Again. I couldn't help but question his work ethic. Trying not to think too much about it, I continued with my routine. But when I reached the second floor, I was shocked. The doors to all 3 bedrooms were wide open. I froze in place. I was absolutely certain that I had closed all the doors before leaving the house the night before. No one else had been in the house, so how were they open? Trying to stay calm, I moved forward and began checking the rooms one by one. I scanned each space with my flashlight: windows, bathrooms, closets, behind furniture, anywhere someone might be hiding. I thought maybe a thief had broken in, but after checking thoroughly, I found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no one inside, just open doors and silence. Still, one question haunted me. How did the doors get open? After checking everything upstairs, I made my way back downstairs and headed toward the front door to return to my post outside. But just as I passed through the living room, I was struck with absolute terror. In the corner of the room stood 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, staring directly at me. Panicked, I raised my flashlight and pointed it at them, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The beam lit up their faces. I instantly recognized them from the family photo hanging on the wall. They were the exact same people, but now, standing in front of me, their bodies showed signs of horrific, gaping wounds. Their clothes were soaked in a red, viscous liquid, but the scariest part? The man slowly raised his hand and pointed directly at me. Then, a deep, resonating voice echoed throughout the entire house.
"Get out now!"
Frozen with fear, I didn't know what to do. I only remember starting to run, and after just a few steps, everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. When I opened my eyes, my supervisor, who had been standing nearby, rushed to my side and asked what had happened. I recounted everything I had experienced the night before. When I finished, he just stood there silently and simply said,
That house, we've had to rotate the night shift guards constantly. No one ever stays long. Everyone who works there ends up quitting.
He went on to explain that the house had been the scene of a tragic and horrifying incident. A family, a father, mother, and child, had all died inside the house. Since the case was still under investigation and the relatives weren't ready to come in and deal with the property, they had decided to hire a security firm to guard the premises in the meantime. But it seemed that the family had become extremely possessive of the property. They had shown themselves to every security guard and scared them all off. After hearing that, I finally understood. What I experienced wasn't much different from what the other guards had seen. I was transferred to another location, and I've never gone near that house again.